Alright, I'm not sure if this video is for real or not. Bit of Poe's Law going on here. So it's possible I'm falling for a troll here, but I guess I'll leave that up to whoever writes the YouTube history books to decide.
Atheists say that science is on their side. They are deluded and gullible.
Hey hoser, you're deluded and gullible, eh?
Science proves atheism is insanity and irrational to the greatest extreme.
You hoser. You're a hoser. He's a hoser, eh?
Yeah, right. You're a hoser.
And you're ignorant, too.
For thousands of years, in thousands of beaches, not one sandcastle has ever eroded into existence.
I find myself inclined to agree with you.
Science says mind did it.
No, your experience makes you assume a human did it. Believe it or not, science doesn't have a whole lot to say on the subject of sandcastles.
And the issue is order, not beauty, so don't give me an example of erosion creating a beautiful pattern of wavy lines on a beach.
Why would I give you that as an example? Why would I give you an example at all? An example to accomplish what? The claim that sandcastles are made by human beings is not in dispute here.
That's irrelevant, a red herring fallacy.
If you're going where I think you're going with this, then I agree. The sandcastles are irrelevant and a red herring. Sandcastles really are not relevant to the topic of whether God exists or not.
The issue is order, not beauty.
The issue. Okay, there's an issue, and the issue is order. And this is about the question of atheism. Are you sure we're talking about the same thing?
And I set the bar at the low level of a sandcastle. And you can't even reach that high, atheists.
The bar. The bar of what? Whether atheism can explain how humans make stuff? See, where I'm getting hung up here, I think, is that you present this video like it's about atheism, but then you, I think, are talking about naturalistic explanations for natural phenomena not being true because humans make sandcastles. It's already really muddled and confusing, and I don't even know what you're trying to get across to me or how it relates to the atheism-theism question. Then again, I don't understand how it relates to the naturalism question either. I don't think there's anyone disagreeing with you that sandcastles are made by humans. I mean, I think the argument you're putting forth here is, hey, look, science, this thing that you don't think happens without humans doing it doesn't happen without humans doing it. So therefore, everything you think does happen doesn't happen at all. It's not much of an argument, really. And either way, it really doesn't have a lot to do with the basic question of whether there's a God or not.
Yet you claim to jump over mountains. Atheist fanatics argue that with an infinite amount of time, it'd be inevitable for sandcastles to erode into existence.
I don't know if I count as one of these fanatics, but for my part, I guess I'd just say no. I don't argue that. I'm not aware of any process operating here, at least on Earth beaches, that even with an infinite amount of time would make it inevitable that sandcastles would be eroded into existence. So why would I argue that it's going to happen?
But this is blind faith.
I suspect it's blind faith that you assume any atheist actually says this. But if they did, you'd have to actually ask them what their reason is. I mean, is it some kind of statement about some kind of quantum level randomness in the universe? Do they think there's some kind of a process operating that is sufficient to build sandcastles, and so given enough time, it becomes likely or even inevitable that these sandcastles appear? Or is it just, I feel it in my heart that given enough time, sandcastles will appear. No God has spoken to me and told me this is true. What actual claim are we talking about here? You're presenting somebody else's conclusion without the argument and then expecting me to go, oh yeah, that's just blind faith. I don't know what it is. You didn't tell me what it is. And I've never heard anyone make this claim in my life, so I can't even try to go from experience.
Watch how that atheist position is willful ignorance and a crazy delusion.
Yes, the atheist position. Every atheist will recognize their position in that position. The position of the atheist. Given an infinite amount of time, it's inevitable that sandcastles will erode into existence. Yep, that's what we've been arguing this whole time. I know it because when I ask an atheist what atheism is, that's what they tell me. I have a 100% success rate of this, with a sample size of 0.
You got a beach, erosion, mindless forces. Create a hole, arguably order.
Wait, so you have a beach, and a hole erodes in the beach, and you say that's arguably order. Wasn't your whole thing that mindless forces don't create order? So if the hole is arguably order, but your assertion is that mindless forces don't create order, shouldn't we maybe argue about the arguably order before we go on?
Atheists imagine that it is possible for a sandcastle in millions of years or whatever to come about mindlessly.
No, I don't see any particular reason why it should. Certainly not one as complex as what you're showing, anyway. Maybe one of those lame ones where somebody fills a bucket up with sand and then just flips it over and says, there, a sandcastle. I don't know of any reason why that would happen either, but at least it's more in the realm of feasibility. It's a simpler structure more in line with the structures that we see created through geologic processes, like mountains, canyons, buttes, things like that. The structure you're showing in particular is pretty unlikely through any sort of geologic process I'm aware of, and I'm pretty sure geologists would back me up on that. But why are we arguing about the capabilities of geologic processes to produce this or that hypothetical thing, of which there are 0 examples to even study, in a video supposedly about atheism?
For example, the hole will become the proper basement, and upon that will be the next level with the towers and the walls and the rest of it. That's just wishful thinking. That's just their imagination. That's not science.
It's not our imagination, it's your imagination. You made it up. And of course it's not science. There's nothing for science to do here. Nobody's found some mysterious pre-human sandcastle that requires a scientific explanation. This is pure fantasy inside your head. Nobody else is proposing this.
That's just their delusion.
No, if anything, it's yours.
The truth is, and you can see it for yourself at every beach, that if erosion makes a hole, it will fill it up again, so it goes back to square one.
Typically, sure. That's a pretty safe assumption. If you see a hole on a beach, it probably won't be there forever. I mean, it's the beach. What I'm confused by is why you think the hole is a prerequisite for the sandcastle. Like you said, it was the basement of the sandcastle. Who puts a basement in their sandcastle?
Water level rises a puny bit, then it goes back to 0. That's pathetic. Your alternative to intelligence is pathetic.
You think this is atheists' alternative to intelligent design? Well, hell, no wonder you say we're deluded and gullible. Who told you this crap?
And this has been going on for thousands of years. Everyone can see how pathetic atheism is.
Holes on the beach getting filled up with more sand has been going on for thousands of years? Yeah, that seems pretty likely. Hey, stupid atheists. Holes on the beach oftentimes get filled up. So that's your claim disproven, that it doesn't, and that it then turns into a sandcastle?
Atheism has no legs to stand on.
Well, yeah, I mean, beaches don't just erode legs into existence either.
Atheism is absurd.
You've really given me a lot to think about. I mean, look at that picture. What am I supposed to say to that? The hole's filled in the picture.
So even in a literally infinite amount of time, you're always going back to square one, because there is no mind, therefore there is no discrimination, therefore there is no intention to preserve any part of the beach to build upon it later.
So what is the core of the assertion then? That if a change occurs naturally, it will always revert back to how it was before the change, no matter what? Well, that's clearly not true. That implies there's some sort of a rule built into the universe that everything that happens will be reversed at some point. Drop a raw egg on the floor, watch it splatter, and then wait around and see what happens. By what mechanism are you proposing that every change has to be reversed to its initial state? This is pure magical thinking. Now that's me generalizing from what you're saying to try to find some kind of a point in it, but maybe you're not speaking generally. Maybe you're just specifically talking about the beach. So okay, let's talk about the beach. Somebody digs a hole in the beach, and it's within the range that the tide will rise to every day. So the water's constantly going to be washing new stuff into this hole. Eventually, most likely, it's going to fill up. The way it fills up will not be the exact way that it was before. The material around it won't be the exact same as it was before, as the ocean carries some of the sand away and carries new sand back, along with sticks, seaweed, animals, minerals, toilet paper, and plastic wrap. And so by the time that hole's filled up, that entire beach has undergone a significant amount of change. And that happens constantly. The beach doesn't just revert to its exact initial state. Ever. That's not how it works. Just because you can choose to intentionally frame it in this incredibly simplistic way, that there's not a hole and then somebody makes a hole and then there's not a hole again. It's exactly the same. It's not that simple. This is reality we're talking about, not a goddamn video game. You gotta start thinking about the real world, not your cartoon. Your cartoon, you realize, is an illustration, not the actual reality of the situation. And the funny thing is, even the way you depict it in your cartoon doesn't match what you're saying. Look at the way you filled in the hole. That doesn't look like the beach around it. It's clearly different from the beach around it. Yes, the hole is filled in, but that area of the beach is permanently changed in some way from what it was before. And that's reality. And the reason for that is exactly what you said, except you interpreted it exactly backwards from how it actually applies. Let me just replay that as a reminder.
You're always going back to square one because there is no mind, therefore there is no discrimination, therefore there is no intention to preserve any part of the beach to build upon it later.
Right, so there is no mind, there is no discrimination, there is no intention to preserve any part of the beach. Precisely. There's no willful entity intentionally returning the beach back to square one exactly how it was before. The beach changes, and the changes stick. It never returns back to square one. Not without some sort of a mechanism or process making that happen, which there isn't, or some sort of a willing entity rearranging the beach back to exactly how it was previously. And so the changes that happen remain changed. It's always going to be different in the future than it was in the past. And these are the kinds of changes upon which geological processes or evolutionary processes build to produce more extreme change. Small changes in large quantity are preserved over time, which over a long period of time amounts to a very large change. In a million years, that beach will look a lot different than it does right now. It has very significant forces acting on it all the time. It probably won't have a sandcastle on it, but nobody's proposing it should. We're proposing it'll be vastly different than it is now. And so it will. Precisely because, not in spite of, the lack of a willing entity acting on it to undo the changes. So in a way, your idea supports the opposite of what you're trying to say it does.
The same mindless forces that create things will destroy them. How are you going to advance with such a regressive method as that?
Well, if you want, look at humanity. The same mindless forces that create a human destroy a human. Your biology brings you to life, and your biology causes your death. And yet our population keeps growing, and we keep thriving. Strange, every single one of us has a beginning and an end, and yet the species survives. It's a gigantic mystery. Except it's really not, is it? Because there is no creation or destruction. There's a dynamic world where destruction of one thing is creation of another. The creation of a river is a destruction of the rock layers it carves through. The destruction of those rock layers is the creation of new layers of sediment in the ocean. The destruction of the oceanic crust it settles on potentially heralds the creation of a new mountain range in the future as continents move, and the sediments that were settled on top may become part of that. We're not dealing with a static system here. We're dealing with the Earth. It has enormous heat energy inside of it. It has plate tectonics. It has abundant energy coming from the sun. It has a dynamic atmosphere, organic material, a food chain of beings coming to life and eating other beings and then being eaten themselves. There is no creation or destruction on the Earth. There's change, and there are systems. There are cycles, and there's a constant input of energy powering the whole thing. Now, if you were talking about some dead planet floating a million light years from any star, I would agree with you. There's nothing dynamic about such an object that would allow it to sustain any meaningful change. But in that case, of course, your example of the hole on the beach really has no relevance because what's going to dig the hole? What's going to fill it in? There's nothing happening. But that's not what happens on the Earth. When a change on a beach is erased to the superficial observer, when death happens to an organism, there's nothing irretrievably lost, aside from the exact precise configuration of the thing. But all of its components are still there and very active. There was no actual act of destruction. It was just changed. And that change will contribute to how things are in the future. To new life, for example, or new arrangements of the beach. You're not thinking about the Earth as a dynamic system. You're basically thinking about the Earth in terms as complex and realistic as that cartoon, which is total nonsense that falls apart even on the most basic analysis.
According to this atheist preacher fanatic, Richard Dawkins, the only watchmaker is the blind forces of physics.
Okay, what about it?
He says in his propaganda how to climb so-called Mount Improbable, which is really Mount Impossible, without a god. He says, how can we get to explain the eye on top of Mount Improbable? He says, with one step or one leap, it's impossible. But if we take lots of little slow steps, then it's not so hard. Really? Well, actually no, because lots of slow steps will not be preserved. Because there's no intention to. You missed that fact.
There's no intention to, but they're still going to be preserved by survival and reproduction. When an animal reproduces, its genes are preserved. Doesn't matter whether anyone intends for that to happen or not, it's still going to happen. Are you unaware of even the basic elements of the conversation that's being had here? I mean, for Christ's sake, even Kent Hovind understands this part. Even he'd probably tell you, you're being kind of stupid there, fella.
The liar ignores the fact. He knows it's there. He doesn't want to see it.
The fact that traits are not preserved in the offspring of an animal because there's no intention to? Do you see why I'm on the fence about whether this video is for real? If this guy just made this for a laugh, okay, you got me.
He's a liar. He's an atheist. He just expects you to have insane, blind, atheist faith in regression as progress.
Reproduction is regression. Apparently. I don't know how, but apparently it is, somehow. Fuck my life.
Atheists cling to a contradiction.
All right, little buddy, you do your thing.
Atheists reject literally endless empirical evidence proving them wrong about their blind watchmaker myth of mindlessness of the gaps. Mindlessness did it. I don't know, therefore mindlessness couldn't have been a god.
Yep, we've all read the scientific papers, we've all observed the scientific arguments, we've all read the books about the scientific process, and that's really what it is, right? It's all just a bunch of little seagulls going, mindlessness, 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 mind. Yep, yeah, oh yeah. All right, I'm getting to the point in the video where I'm starting to wonder why I'm bothering, because look, what am I going to say here? Am I going to go through a big explanation of the basics of the scientific method? How scientific observations work? How people actually reach conclusions? What good's it going to do? This guy doesn't give a shit. And everybody watching who probably does give a shit already knows. Which, okay, is almost always the case with this bottom of the barrel kind of stuff, but at least some things that they say can lead to some sort of an interesting discussion. At least something I find engaging to say. It's up to you whether it's engaging to listen to. This, though? Okay, you know what? Nuh-uh. There. That's all this is worth. Let's move on.
No siree, Bob. I see an SOS on the beach. I conclude rationally must have been intended. But if I see DNA, oh no, it could not have been intended. Or else there's a God, and then I go to hell for being selfish. I want to get away with being selfish. That's the real reason I'm an atheist. Science has nothing to do with it. It's all about my ego.
Let's take a quick walk through the thought process you've made up for us here. So an atheist sees the world and goes, yep, obviously there was all kinds of intention and there was a God behind this and nothing ever happens unless somebody intends for it to for some reason. I believe all of that. And that means somehow that I must be going to hell because intentional design of the universe implies a God that sends people to hell. I don't know. But I want to be selfish. And, I mean, the God doesn't send people to hell for being selfish. He sends them for not believing in him. But still, selfishness is involved here somehow, and that's my priority now. I don't want to go to hell not for being selfish. That's a terrible fate. How do I avoid this? Let me think. Okay, one option is that I could do what the God tells me to do to not go to hell. Seems pretty simple, and I believe that's true and necessary, and that's the only way to not go to hell. But I don't know, my ego, I got this ego. I think what I'm going to do is just pretend like I don't believe it and make up a bunch of science that very convincingly makes it appear that everything that people used to say God did wasn't really caused by God. And I'm going to spend all my time, along with millions of other people who are atheists and also Christians and Muslims and every other religion, painstakingly researching this and vetting every detail against reality. And then I'm still going to go to hell, but I'll pretend that I'm not, and then that helps the situation somehow. Now I can be selfish and still believe that the God I'm fighting against is real and that I'm going to hell, but feel better about it? Haha, take that, God, I outsmarted you. Okay, I've heard a lot of people make up a lot of dumbass motivations for other people, but this takes the cake. This is absolutely ridiculous. Do you seriously believe this?
Science shits on atheism. Erosion proves it.
Erosion proves it. You haven't talked about erosion. You've talked about sandcastles can't be eroded into existence. It doesn't really say anything about erosion in general, let alone erosion in general proves the existence of God. What the hell is this video?
Atheists will always be losers. Don't be a loser. Repent of ingratitude and lying, pretending that great order can come about mindlessly. Nature tells you all the time, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Okay, you can say nature tells us that all the time and we're wrong, we're wrong, we're wrong. But then we look at actual nature, not what you say about it, and it shows that you're absolutely full of shit. So I'm going to take nature's word, not yours. But thanks for the input.
An infinite amount of time isn't going to save you.
Don't need infinite time, don't need to be saved from anything. Erosion happens all the time and the results are preserved. If my idea was that erosion would create a complicated sandcastle on a particular beach, maybe I would feel like I had a bit more of a problem. But as it is, I think that geologists are going to be just fine. Still don't know what it has to do with atheists. I mean, atheism is not an assertion about the results of erosion.
Time isn't on your side. More time means more destruction by mindless forces.
More time means lots of things. All kinds of stuff happens all the time. Why are you picking out this one thing?
So you have amount improbable is a lie. It's amount impossible. Deluded atheists. You have you have erosion or tornadoes or whatever mindless forces you have, they're always, and you can see it, it's not my opinion, you can always see it, it's empirical, they're always overwhelmingly more destructive of order than progressive of order.
Okay, so processes that you say are destructive, and all the other stuff we're just going to ignore. And somehow you think people are not going to pick up on this.
If you don't believe me, it's because you do believe, but you don't want to admit. You know this is the truth, you don't want to admit.
Cope.
Atheists are evil. You know there's a God, you don't want to admit.
You agree with me. You must agree with me. I think I'm right, so you have to agree with me. Come on, guys. Come on.
And some of you have already forgotten what you know. Suppress the truth, lied so much you start believing your lies.
Christianity really doesn't get any more pathetic than this, does it? This is the worst of it. No, you know I'm right. You're just suppressing it, right? Come on, guys, please. Please tell me I'm right. It's fucking painful to listen to.
But you know that mindless forces are an absurd explanation for great order. You can see it all the time. Come on.
I mean, good.
Anyway, isn't it ironic that the same people calling people like me idiots and the atheists do it all the time?
Oh, I'm sure a lot of people do that all the time.
Their main argument is an ad hominem fallacy. Oh, you're a creator, you're a religitard, you're an idiot because you believe in intelligence.
I can't speak for anyone else, but no, the reason I think you're an idiot is because you're clearly an idiot.
That's so ironic. Yeah, I believe in intelligence. That makes me not unintelligent. You believe in mindlessness. That makes you mindless. That makes you not smart.
If you believe I'm an idiot, that makes you an idiot, because you believe in idiots, and you are whatever you believe in. If you believe in rocks, you're a rock. See, you don't even briefly think through the things you say. You're an idiot.
So the atheists who call people like me idiots believe the equivalent of, look at this here, that tornado be building that building, just a matter of time. I got proof, just wait forever. Very convenient.
Erosion builds sandcastles and tornadoes build buildings. Atheism.
You're not fit to judge on intelligence when you believe such stupid shit as time will make tornadoes build houses. More time equals more probability of a tornado building a house. Yuck.
That sure ding dong diddly is what I dang ol' believe. I say. Yuck.
Now some guy said, apparently, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Like telling atheists over and over again that they actually believe everything you say, but they just don't want to admit it, and hoping that someday that's going to work on anyone.
Mindless forces over and over again result in destruction, chaos, and the regression of order overwhelmingly.
You picked two things. You picked erosion, which you barely even touched on, and then tornadoes. Why would I even attempt to draw some sort of general principle about what mindless forces do from that? Gravity, chemistry, electromagnetism, The only things in the world that are relevant are erosion and tornadoes. Everything I need to know about the natural world I learned from watching a tornado. Yuck.
But atheists are insane. Don't be so crazy. You know, intelligent design is rational.
Nah, we're close to the end here, get on with it.
Every time you preach against it, you're giving evidence for it because you're doing it by intelligent design. You're hypocrites.
Every time you preach against evolution, you're giving evidence for it because you're alive because of evolution. You're a hypocrite. Yuck.
Atheism is insanity. Science shits on atheism. Let me go back to that picture because it's so beautiful. Science shits on your atheism.
QED.
I'm typing mindlessly because it's a matter of time until I do it right. Time makes it happen. I am an atheist.
Was that a serious video? I don't know, 50-50. I guess leave a comment about whether you think it was legit and why. Thanks for watching. If you would, please give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. Huge thanks to all of my supporters on every platform. If you want early access, sign up to the email list, list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.